This is Charles Brown. He's from Emporia University in Emporia, Kansas. They have just organized a Green Party of Kansas, so let's hear it for the Green Party of Kansas. Woo-hoo! So he and I are going to talk about electoral politics and dialogue. And Charlie's going to go first, and then I will go second, and we try to hold ourselves to 10 minutes, maybe 11, maybe 10 minutes and 10 seconds, who knows? But nevertheless, we're going to strive for that, and that should leave us about 30 minutes for discussion. So here we go. Charlie?
Thank you, John. I have some handouts here that we might pass out now or later. And I am looking at a flyer for the Kansas Green Party. And the rhetoric on the flyer talks about a profound crisis in the planet, talks about the need for a new ecological worldview, talks about the values of social justice. And what I want to talk about is the role of dialogue for an organization like the Green Party. I will keep my remarks as short as possible in an impressionistic manner where I just float some big ideas as small as I can. But I want to start by quoting and then commenting on a well-known Lawrence Ferlinghetti poem. And the quote goes something like this: "I am waiting for someone to really discover America. I am perpetually awaiting a rebirth of wonder." Now, my comment is that I am waiting to be inspired by a political party. And after attending this morning's general session, I'm moving in the direction of being inspired by a political party. But I wanted to talk about what it would take to make, for someone like me, to be inspired by a political party. And it would require more than simply articulating what I already believe. It would require the cultivation of a new kind of politics, new kind of politics that would restore a positive meaning to politics, and I am indebted to John for that idea. How is that possible? Well, a party like the Green Party could move in the direction away from the model of adversarial debate towards a model of cooperative dialogue. I'll explain what I mean by dialogue in a little bit, but first let me ask this question: dialogue towards what? And the answer I have today is, of course, the great issues of our time, and I will just mention a few: mass extinction, ubiquitous pollution, climate disruption. But currently, we're unable to deal with those issues because we are divided. There's massive distrust of the public sector and the concentration of governmental power. There's massive distrust of the private sector and the concentration of corporate power. And what we need is not more debate on these issues, but more dialogue. So what do I mean by dialogue? Well, here's a partial definition, a definition that, to become more adequate, will need more dialogue. Dialogue is a conversation rooted in the desire to learn from others. It's a conversation rooted in the desire to move our thinking forward, rooted in the desire to better understand points of view that are not my own, rooted in the desire to bring diverse perspectives together, not to erase those differences, but to find openings for consensus and the emergence of new shared ways of making sense of things. So, if that's a sketch of what dialogue is, dialogue with whom? Well, the obvious candidates are our adversaries, our friends, and ourselves. Let me just say something very briefly about each one of those. Dialogue with our adversaries, and I will make up a generic adversary. I will call them free market fundamentalists, who are champions of the old worldview, an anthropocentric capitalist ideology. Who are our friends? Well, fellow travelers, ecologically oriented organizations, social justice oriented organizations, large and small, and ourselves. And I'm first thinking about intra-Green Party dialogue. What is the beginning of dialogue? How do we get started? Well, I want to suggest that one way to get started is to recognize that the perspectives our adversaries, our friends, and even ourselves are not monolithic. There's a cluster of competing perspectives in each one of those points of view. The free market fundamentalists is an umbrella for multiple perspectives. Our friends entertain a multiple perspectives, and we as Green Party people also entertain multiple perspectives. And so perhaps the way to, and also more importantly, to get started in dialogue, it's helpful to recognize that even within myself, within a single individual, multiple perspectives, multiple points of view animate who I am, and they're often in tension. And so we need not just dialogue between adversaries, friends, and ourselves, but we need dialogue within each individual person. We need to cultivate dialogue within myself, and I wish to suggest that this may be a necessary condition for dialogue with others. Now, in political discourse, we are often attached to our own points of view and our own beliefs. And when challenged, we frequently become dogmatic, and when that happens, we descend into adversarial dialogue. And so I will just make one more suggestion. If we reflect for just a moment on the Buddhist ideal of non-attachment, if we can learn to hang on to our points of view and still be passionate about them, at the same time have some distance from them, then we gain the ability to not be dogmatic and be open to change within ourselves. And until we're open to change within ourselves, then it seems to me that dialogue with the other is not very helpful. Okay, now I also have, if I may borrow this, want to suggest 4 principles of dialogue. I will only mention the first sentence in these. First principle of dialogue, find an element of truth in the position of the other. Find the most generous interpretation of the position of the other. Second principle, don't confuse the map for the territory. And the idea here is not to confuse the way things make sense for me with the way things really are. Third principle, to recognize that any perspective or conceptual framework powerful enough to reveal something important also conceals something of importance. And finally, dialogue, as I understand it, is revisionist discourse. Participants must be open to changing their mind. Participants must resist what sometimes philosophers refer to as epistemic closure. That is, to resist the idea that we already have the final truth. And all of those principles of dialogue are very difficult for everybody. Okay? Now, let me suggest briefly some barriers to dialogue. And if dialogue begins in the recognition and respect for differences, what are barriers to dialogue? Well, an obvious barrier for many, perhaps most people, is some structural features of the most common worldview that we generally share. Most of us tend to make sense of the world by separating differences into mutually exclusive categories and then privileging one over the other. And I have two of these structural differences in mind. I will only talk about one, but some of the handouts talk about the other. The two I have in mind is the distinction between realism and idealism. I will say a few words about that. The other one is the distinction between the common good and the private good, and maybe we can get to that in the discussion. But the realistic idealist distinction. Now, free market fundamentalists self-define themselves as realists. I'm sure you've heard that. And they also define organizations like the Green Party as idealistic. And when the Green Party is defined as idealistic, most of us know that that's code, right? It's code for what? Well, you've got some sweet and pretty ideas, but they just won't work. At best, they're a waste of time. At worst, they're dangerous, right? Now, but we can easily turn that around. From the Green Party perspective, the free fundamentalists believe what? That all social problems are best solved by market forces. That's a sweeping claim. It's a grand narrative that one simple solution is the best for all, right? And of course, that's a version of the claim that markets, rather than democratic deliberation, knows best. It's a version of the old claim of the invisible hand, right? And so from the Green Party perspective, the ideas of the free market fundamentalists are the ones that are idealistic. Idealistic in the sense that, wouldn't it be great if market forces really did supply the best solution to all problems? It would be that simple. Wouldn't it be great if markets really did know best, right? Well, when we reflect on it, most of us, I think, realize that that's not realism at all. That's a fantasy. It's magical thinking, right? Another similar example is that the advocates of the two-party system, some of them may be sympathetic to the Green Party system. What do they say about the Green Party? Well, you've got some good ideas, but if you're going to get realistic about things, you need to join the two-party system. That's where the power is. That's how you make change. Now, is that realistic or is that idealistic? I say that is idealistic because what is the two-party system? I think most of us realize the two-party system is a captive of the status quo. Can you really make change, the change that's needed? Is it a realistic approach to make serious change by buying into the structures of the status quo? I think that's a form of idealism rather than realism, right? And one last thing, I have heard that within the Green Party, there's a distinction between two perspectives, two orientations of the Green Party. Some people are more interested in changing the worldview, an ecological worldview, seeing the world in a new perspective. And other people are more interested in what I would refer to as electoral success, focus on elections, candidates, ballot access, all of which are important things, right? Now, it is tempting, it's very tempting for either one of those perspectives to claim that they are the realistic ones and the other ones are idealistic, right? So I'm going to begin to stop my comments now, but what I want to suggest is that all of those divisions, the way I've laid them out, result from conceptualizing the world, conceptualizing the differences in the world in terms of mutually exclusive categories, and then privileging one over the other. A new way of thinking, what I hope that the Green Party can bring to the world, and what I hope dialogue can bring to the world, is a kind of thinking where we do not always separate things into polar opposites and then privilege one over the other. When we do that, we allow ourselves the freedom for each of those ideas to mingle amongst themselves and settle themselves out in a way which consensus becomes possible, in which we do not live in an intellectually polarized world. And I think that that's the promise of what John Rensenbrink and other places has articulated as the promise of a new form of politics, one that restores a positive meaning to politics. So
Thank you. Thank you. That's wonderful. I don't know how Charles does it, but boy, he sure does a good job. Beautiful. I'm going to do a slightly different job. I usually do what he tries to do, not so successfully. I'm going to read. Can you imagine? I'm going to read my manuscript, and I want you to listen to every word. I take my cue from this thematic. The thematic is dialogue a necessary as well as a valued part of Green Party campaigns for office and for performance in office. I'll repeat that. Is dialogue a necessary as well as a valued part of Green Party campaigns for office and for performance in office? Of course, is the immediate response. That's a no-brainer. But before just saying amen to that, we should look again. Following up from Charlie's analysis and commentary, one could point out that relying on dialogue may not always be the best recipe to follow in electoral campaigns. As a candidate and as a campaign manager, you face a huge challenge. You must reach many people. Is dialogue even possible with large numbers of people? More troubling is that people are very busy getting on with their lives in a very hurried and distracting world and social environment. Nor are they terribly positive about political campaigns and politicians to begin with. And they are already deluged with negative political advertisements and one-sided claims and appeals of a kind that make dialogue very problematic. Dialogue demands deliberation. It needs the participation, it needs the participants to pause for thought and to sort things out. Better then is the counsel of the people who know or claim to know to resort to rhetoric to arouse, soothe, and charismatically charm the generality of voters. Focus on what you feel this group or that group will respond to, suiting your words and the spin of words to what you and the experts think is their interests, their prejudices, their desire to feel good about themselves. Doing this, you sidestep your somewhat guilty thoughts and your abandonment of dialogue. You tell yourself that you must get the voters' attention, that once you have their attention, they will hear your bigger and deeper message and engage with it. But it doesn't work out that way. The rhetoric soon gets out of bounds and out of hand. What remains is that even if you win and get into office, you have demonstrated your sameness to the established parties and their politicians. Basically, you have joined them. So, how important is winning? Quote, "Winning isn't everything," said my campaign manager to me in one of my campaigns. We were having coffee in a Maine Lewiston diner, very early morning, gearing up for a day's work going door to door. I nodded at his seemingly sincere homily, thinking positive thoughts, even grateful thoughts. But after a significant pause, he said, "It's the only thing." There was a moment as this sank into me and we collapsed in laughter at the irony, the seeming joke, yet feeling the prickle of some truth there. So you shift your thinking. You go for the longer haul in your thoughts. True, you say to yourself, you may not win this time, but try again. Get your name out there. Eventually you may win, or at least you will have carried the ball a ways, and you help grow the party by grooming and inciting others to get into it. Thus, winning eventually is a better goal. Maybe. Yet how does this play out in terms of sustaining morale? The morale of present and potential Green candidates, the morale of Green voters and voters in general, and the fickle interest of the press, who for the most part are only interested in winners or likely winners, and you may soon drop, they may soon drop you and your party's candidates. So a crucial question is here. By what standard of speech are you being guided in your pursuit of office? Let's go back to dialogue and look more closely at what it means. What constitutes dialogue? For me, dialogue is interactive, and I emphasize interactive. Dialogue is interactive conversation, treating voters as persons, not as consumers, treating what they say with respect, reaching out to who they are as persons, building and facing their daily problems, and trying to be ahead of the storm. This does not mean sweeping an uncritical agreement with them, nor does it mean telling them what they should be thinking. Strive for conversation. Is this applicable to all campaigns? It is useful, I believe, to distinguish dialogue in relation to local, state, and national politics. For local campaigns for office, and once you are in local office, the standard can and should be as much dialogue as possible. I think that's right, that's possible. At the level of state office seeking, however, and of conducting that office if and when you get there, there is this. In states like Maine, for example, campaigns for state house seats and even for state senate seats can also be fields in which fully seeking dialogue is at least possible and practicable in most cases. In other states with huge electoral districts and huge accompanying populations, this may not be possible. There, recourse to rhetoric seems the only sensible thing to do, though it can be threaded with authentic efforts at dialogue. However, for national office, the balance shifts and tilts radically. Dialogue seems impossible. Here, the temptation and tendency is strong to be more like the usual politician. Adroit rhetoric, indulging in generalities, cleverly and antagonistically attacking your opponent, and making large and often unwarranted promises. That seems the way to go. If this picture is accurate, or at least arguable, what does it mean for the Green Party and for any devotion it may or should have to the uses of dialogue? Well, dialogue to me wins the day if it is based on a profound attitude of respect for people in their life world. Don't offer them the world, nor offer them the plush rose garden. Don't harangue them with what you will do for them. Don't harangue them with what you will do for them. Instead, offer them your help in helping them build their life and reach their dreams for family, community, for a lively education, for peace and security, and for a satisfying job and a thriving life. And don't be bashful about urging them to make common cause with others for these same things. If this attitude is truly and actively present in your campaign for office, and also when you are in office, then dialogue has a robust chance. And also then also a bit of salutary rhetoric is possible and helpful. For then, rhetoric has a dialogic context in which to persuade voters to vote for you. But this approach is virtually out of reach at the level of national politics, especially the presidency. Furthermore, along this same line, suppose your opponents can't or won't or even don't know how to dialogue, which is generally the case in the race for president and in most senatorial and gubernatorial campaigns in most states. Indeed, they will instead overwhelm you with clever and often vicious attacks. They will do this if you seem like a threat. If they do not think of you as any kind of a threat, they will patronize you and ignore you, and the press will follow suit. I speak from experience. Under the circumstances I've outlined, does it make sense to even try for dialogue? Well, do it anyway. Doing it anyway takes patience, great inner discipline, and, most of all, the steady backing of a party that is devoted to the long haul. It must be a party that makes that clear to the voter and the press. Over time, this builds confidence among the voters and among Greens who want to run for office, the confidence that the long haul will gradually yield electoral success, and it will. In addition, please note that working for and battling for changes in the electoral system has great potential for facilitating dialogue. Leading examples of such, which are all ongoing now, led by different groups, are the following, 5 of them. Instant runoff voting, also known as ranked choice voting. Secondly, publicly funded campaigns, such as in Maine, where it is called clean elections, also in Connecticut and in Arizona. Elimination of the outmoded electoral college and replacing it with a straightforward election of the president by popular vote. And also enabling presidential candidates who have shown voter strength in many states to participate in presidential debates. The Green and Libertarian parties are currently pushing for this, and for the first time are beginning to make some headway. And lastly, of the 5, opening up restricted ballot access opportunities in most states that now wildly favor the Democratic and Republican parties. These things remake the structure of running for office and help create an atmosphere in which dialogue is more likely to catch on as the main way to conduct local, state, and national elections for public office. Yet, my last comment, the key is to have and maintain a clear standard of what dialogue is and requires. The kind of dialogue I and Charlie have outlined earlier in our talks, we've touched on that, outlined it. If and as this is followed in election after election, the present gap will lessen between movements for cultural and social transformation on the one hand and participation in Green Party electoral politics on the other. Party and movement will converge together to some degree, at least be aligned. The Green Party will also avoid becoming just another political fraud. If and as the Green Party shows the way through a powerful emphasis on dialogue in tandem with a tempered use of rhetoric, it will be seen as a new kind of party and will get a greater and greater hearing among the people. The people's voice, consequently, through a party that demands dialogue, will get ever stronger and clearer. And public policies will tilt more and more towards real solutions of the vexing and dangerous crisis we are now in. Thank you very, very much. So we open the proceedings to questions, comments. Yeah.
It's 30.
Name some success stories, I think was the question.
Okay. Success stories in
Of the
Great party.
And the Rensenbrink dialogue.
What do people think here are success stories of the Green Party?
Richmond, California. Yeah.
What happened there?
Mayor. We got, Gail McLaughlin elected the mayor, and, she took on Chevron and tried to have an urban pollution, and she also tried to use eminent domain to keep people in their houses, so that kicked out to the curb. I think it's a pretty good success story.
Not only got elected, but re-elected, right?
That's right.
And then she got on to city council, but she got, term limited.
The board appointment, she worked with an organization, Richmond.
Progressive Alliance.
Thank you. Richmond Progressive Alliance, so not just the Green, so she's getting other people who believe with her going, and that is a dialogue in itself, because these are people, in the area of Richmond, you normally would not vote a whole lot, but because of them, and because their outreach with other people in that area, people are voting out, and they stopped Chevron's $3 million campaign against her.
Right.
People won over the money.
$3 million.
For this time, and that's not too shabby.
You're not saying, however, you're not. One thing that has always sort of, and in this paper of mine, has always very much caught my attention, and that is that how often we confuse successful rhetoric and persuading people to our point of view with dialogue. What I'm offering here for you folks to think about, and me too, is can we really figure out how we can talk with people and not just to them. And that's really crucial to me. I mean, otherwise dialogue is just vapor. We are not, I feel we just really rely upon marvelous talking and persuasion and what I call rhetoric. And rhetoric is an honorable thing, but it can get out of hand if it loses its context in dialogue. So I'm pleading for awareness that campaigns that we have are rooted in the thought of having dialogue, and at the same time recognizing that under circumstances you need to lard it up a little bit with persuasive talk. And that's very interesting because it lapses into another thing that a pet peeve I have after listening to the Democrats and Republicans for umpteen decades. And that is they will always say, this is what I'm going to do for you. This is what I'm going to do for you. This is what I'm going to do for you. And it all is just a lot of bullshit.
One of the things that I think came across clearly in John's talk that I had hoped to get into mine, so I was glad to hear it in John's, is that one of the, I'll just use my language, difference between debate and dialogue. Debate is generally for the short term. It's to win today, it's to win tonight, it's to win this week. But dialogue doesn't work that way. It's, as you put it, for the long haul. In order to change worldview, we don't have a debate and people vote and then the worldview is changed. In order to change the worldview, it's gradual, it's slow, it has to build. You have to have a foundation, you have to build on that. It's little by little, piece by piece, and that, as John so eloquently put it, is for the long haul. And when you have a debate with people and try to set the other straight, you never really have a meeting of minds. And until you have a meeting of minds, then you're not going to be able to have genuine dialogue, and you're not going to be able to change people's worldviews.
No.
Yeah. I'm wondering, like, so how do you reconcile the need or desire for gradual, slow, deliberate dialogue with the immediate urgencies at hand that need to?
I don't know the answer to that.
It's a great question.
It's a great question.
It's a great question, and it's a fundamental dilemma. That's exactly right.
Yeah, but I do think it requires something special, and I think we are a special phenomenon. I don't really know in the history of the United States that has ever seen the emergence of our kind of party. I don't think so. With our kind of insistence, not only on nonviolence, but the implications of nonviolence.
And my question would be, has Green Party lived up to that potential, that promise? And I'm not one to answer that, but I doubt, but that goal seems so high, maybe nobody's going to live up to it. But if we don't have high goals, we won't get closer and closer and closer to them. And back to your question, when we advocate dialogue here as a slow process, that doesn't mean we're against debate. There is a place for debate, but our political system has been consumed by too much debate, too little dialogue. So maybe that's the beginnings of an answer to your question.
So dialogue and debate aren't mutually exclusive.
That's what I was trying to get at the very beginning, yes. Is that, let's not polarize these things as mutually exclusive alternatives, yes.
Well, we're up against the mightiest propaganda system in the world that,
Yep.
we should not sell ourselves short that we haven't gotten that far is because we're up against a massive propaganda system. And when you talk about dialogue taking time, I know my dad did this and I've done it too. I've worked at the same place for 22 years. Finally, people I've worked with for 20 years are starting to understand what I talk about. Or you can have a nice conversation with someone one day and they seem to go, yeah, maybe we should do that. And the next time you talk to them, they've reset right back to the way they were before. It does take a long time, and I agree with you. I feel the fierce urgency of now, the way Martin Luther King pointed.
Right.
We're up against planetary extinction, and people are telling me, well, why don't you run for school board instead? Why don't you do something you can win? It's like, excuse me, I'm trying to save the world here, and you're talking about, and I get that people are like that. Oh, start small, and then over 20, 40, 50 years, when we're living on a smoking wasteland, then I'm going to go for something bigger. But I mean, we have this problem. We have a problem where people are formed in a massive system of thought, groupthink. And when you come and say something, it's so weird to them. Actually, one of my coworkers, it was awesome. She's a right-wing Republican married to a cop. And her sister said, I've never heard anyone talk like her before. And she said, listen here, all you've ever heard is A and B. But not everyone thinks A or B. Some people think G. And that's what you're hearing when you hear her talk. And I was like, yeah. It took 20 years and she finally realized this,
Go ahead.
I think he was ahead of me.
Oh, okay.
So I think in Florida we had a really, really
great situation, even though it came out of a really, really bad situation. In Fort Lauderdale, last year, they banned sharing food with the homeless.
Oh, yes.
So you can go, you can serve up to 60 days in jail for doing that. So that outraged the community. So you had pastors, you had anarchists, atheists, socialists, Greens, libertarians, people from all walks of life. They came together and they rallied for this particular cause. Everybody was in favor of revoking the ban. But that action led us to dialogue. It led us to understanding new things. It led us to conversations about Black Lives Matter, about Palestine, about immigration, about women's liberation. And we widened our scope and our understanding. And that widened our support and our numbers. And so I think in Broward County, Florida, well, a really great thing is happening. We're talking with other bodies, we're talking with other groups, and we're doing something great. March Against Monsanto in Miami, Jill Stein came, and it was almost a complete Green Party endorsed march. I'm talking a huge march going through downtown Miami. Jill Stein, the main, speaker, and everybody's hearing Green Party. And now, in Broward County, the county I'm from, they're going to have a charter review board, and the Libertarians and the Greens are going to come together for that, to put in IRB in our county charter. So I think our dialogue is happening. We are getting something, and we are giving something, we are learning something, and we are teaching something, and this constant dialectic is just helping us grow in our heads and in our numbers.
Thank you.
I
That's very
thought
good.
you expressed that very well, and I just want to make one little comment about that. I think you point to something significant and profound, and to get back to dialogue, when you have a debate about issues, you can focus that debate on the issues and particular issues and leave everything else out. Dialogue forces you to see the interrelations of all those different sorts of issues that you were talking about. And they are interrelated. And until we see those interrelations, then we're stuck on a treadmill, so to speak, just going around and around.
Yeah.
And I like that, the point you made about one issue flowering into many different kinds of
Yep.
issues.
Yep. Yep. Go ahead.
Framing the issue, framing the discussion, the discourse is really important. One way to speed things up, which we really must do, is to use the language of the right/wrong. And when you listen to such people, they're really keyed into security issues. It's, oh my God, defend the borders. Oh, there are enemies everywhere. And when we listen to that and we reframe our green arguments, we get more traction. So I've been a long-term advocate, Kent Mesplay from California. I've been an advocate of addressing our issues in terms of security issues. Climate change is a security issue.
Yep.
Sustainability is a security issue. And when we do that, we can make the compelling argument. But it takes us listening to what these people's concerns are as well. I attended a meeting of the Transpartisan Alliance some time ago. There are many on the right who recognize that there's no safe/sacred space, it seems, in politics to our mutual detriment. And so we need to look for those overlapping areas where we can come together, that part of the Venn diagram that everything encompasses. And I really believe, I sincerely believe, this isn't just chatter. I believe that security is the way we can reach a great number of people, because we don't meet our basic physical security issues: water, food, and energy. And we see that when there's an earthquake or a firestorm, etc. We see how poorly prepared we are. But if we have more food growing that's available, if we plan by watershed, if we have renewable energy and a distributed network, we're better prepared for short-term and long-term emergencies. So for me, that issue is security that can really help us.
Security is predictability.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
We can think ahead.
And how can you depend on your water and your food and your air,
And most people don't think about that.
right?
Yeah.
And what I hear the two of you doing is embracing the idealism that's probably attracted most of us to here, but contesting that it's not realistic. That saying our positions may be idealistic, but they are the realistic approach as well.
They're too realistic. It's a threat to our
Right.
consumption-based society. Green solutions abound. What we lack is the political will. So we need to break through very quickly, which we can do. And I think this is a key time for the Green Party. We need to be forceful and attentive. But, you know, nonviolence doesn't mean being passive. One can be very passionate and
Right.
nonviolent.
But what I get from this conversation right now is how important it is to register with a widespread phenomenon that we're all familiar with, and that phenomenon is immediate gratification. And we're schooled in that, and we're tempered by that, but we are also influenced by that. And I think, in my thinking in recent years, that's okay if we can show the relationship between the immediate gratification, like you mentioned, security, the specifics of one's life, one's life, food, energy, education, these things. If we can hammer away at that this is what we stand for, that this ties in with their interest in their family and their life. And that gets right back to whether or not we have sufficient respect in our souls for people. And I don't think there is very much communication to most people in this society from politicians. And we have to be politicians that really do feel with the people and identify with their needs. And what they need, for example, is, you said, the security in the vital aspects of their lives. And I think if we were people like that, going around the country and candidates doing that, that would really change the paradigm.
You know, on that track of security, I mean, if you look at what what do we call it, the other people say, what is in the media, what is being pushed, it's terrorism, they stress that, which is, they're appealing to your concern about your security when they say that something out there is really going to get you, but yet, what is really happening is the bridge that just washed out in LA and the air basics that we were discussing. So the field is getting pretty soft there. I mean, they're losing the logic game.
Right.
Yep.
I think that good points were made, that security is an issue, something that can bring everyone together. To my mind, the biggest security issue of the day is climate change. There is a workshop on Saturday that's going to discuss how to run for a congressional House U.S. House Representative seat on climate change. And it also covers where to run, how to campaign, how to act in office in the poisonous atmosphere of Washington, and how to get reelected. It's called How to Get Elected to the House of Congress. I have U.S. House of Representatives. You may want to attend.
Is that a green card thing?
Yes, Saturday.
Yep.
I have a question. You talk about dialogue, and dialogue between folks that are aware of the issues and some of the things versus dialogue to the masses that do not have the understanding of the issues that are trying to be discussed. How do you have a dialogue in that?
Answer, but I have an immediate answer to that. I'm sorry. I just react very strongly to the word masses. I think it's a huge mistake. The left has made that mistake again and again, and that's why we don't reach the people. We view them as, in a general sense, as the masses. What I'm trying to emphasize here, among other things, is to treat people as individually respectful people. That we respect them.
I use the word masses just because in my interaction with individuals, okay, that have no clue. You ask them, well, do you know how a bill gets through Congress? Who is your congressional representative?
I wouldn't ask that. I would ask, what are your needs? How can I help you with your needs? That would get their attention. And then they might get interested in those political niceties. Most people are absolutely ignorant about the questions that you're asking. Absolutely. Even candidates, I know, a favorite thing of reporters, for example, they say, what is your congressman? To the candidate, and they stutter and they don't know themselves, and they go away gleeful. Well, is that really the most important question? No. The most important question is the paradigm of really respecting people in their worldview life, in their world life. That's my passion and my argument, that we need to be a party that actually identifies with the people.
I agree with you. The terminology I'm using is a broad terminology when you try to connect with
Okay.
the individual.
No, I'll grant you that.
You know, and it's like, I don't go up to people and go, well, who's your congressman? That's not how you start the dialogue. I was just using that as an example of the lack of knowledge,
Yep.
okay?
Sure.
So again, my question is, you know, when you ask them, well, what are their needs? Is that basically the best way to start this dialogue?
Okay.
You know, I guess that's what I'm saying. How do you initiate the dialogue with the masses or with the people, right? The
Yeah.
individual as you come across
But
each one.
don't you also think that we often think we lead with views? What is your view? And I began to think that the most important thing to me is the person, not that person's views. And that's a big difference, the difference between the map and the territory. The territory is that person. The map is the views that that person seems to have. The views that the person has change. Sometimes there was a wonderful book written in the early 70s about, it was pointed out that most people over a period of time changed their views from 49% to 51%, and then it's changed. But the really important thing I'm talking about is not identifying with people's views and the pluralism of views. I'm talking about the plurality of persons, to identify, because persons are the ones who have views, not views having persons. Insofar as our society is going crazy with verbiology, is that views have persons. And that's just a tremendous mistake.
Okay, I think Kevin had a question, and then you, and then you. Kevin?
Really a comment, excuse me. I'd like to connect it with the issue of safety that you brought up, the climate change as an issue of safety. And then also a really important theme that you brought out, Charlie, the inner dialogue within the self. Okay, and I want to connect this with the false knowledge that is so predominant in our culture. I think false knowledge is more dangerous than ignorance. I mean, the sound bits that come out, okay, on the news, in the media, all the way, but the politicians, the bankers and so on, politicians, the sound bits that come out, and the media that the young children are using, okay, they're breaking stuff down to information, little bundles of information. That's one of the things that we have to burst away, I think. And I think interactive dialogue in the classroom, beginning in the grammar school, is absolutely essential if we're to get anywhere in the long run. Interactive discussion. In my class, I used to give lectures. I'm teaching about the same length of time Charles is. For me, I've been in this one position for 30 years. I used to give lectures the first few years, and then I realized I'm just giving them more information. And why am I doing that? And then I started to have an interactive discussion. I never give lectures now. My classes are really exciting, and the students realize when they interact with one another, I force them, in a sense, okay, to actually do the reading. And I have them sign something that I'm going to stay in this course, and if I do, I will do the reading, and if I don't, I can be ejected. I have not quite that language, but that's what I'd like to have it. Okay, and most of the time, the first class, 5 or 6 people will leave, maybe a quarter of the class, and I thank them for leaving. If they don't want to do the work, I want them to get out of there. I want people who are willing to critically look at the views and the store of knowledge that they think they have. And once you can identify some kind of claim or set of claims that a person makes, say about climate change, and we know there's a lot of so-called junk science about that. If you can kind of adroitly bring out all the background presuppositions are made by those who say that climate change is a myth, if you can adroitly bring those out, you can disassemble that piece of false knowledge. And that becomes a paradigm of how to go about every other thing that you believe. I could go on and on about this, but I won't.
I've been at this a real long time. Back early 70s, I wrote a paper for advanced comm class about, I wish it had ecologically based politics. So when the things happened in Europe in the late 70s, the Green Party, I was aware of that. In the 80s, I was a bartender in an Irish bar in Milwaukee, about 10 years. And I
Your paper was
engaged in
successful.
dialogue every night. Okay, and I learned some real tricks too. You know, I was talking green stuff all the time. I didn't identify myself as a green. I never used the word like masses because that's associated with the communists. Okay, and you can just see the eyelids come down and the conversation either stops or changes. But you can talk to people, but we gotta get out of our comfort zone. You know, we can't keep talking to the same people. I think one of the things that keeps us from doing that is the labels that we give ourselves and we give other people. And I think it gets back to Whitehead's idea of misplaced concreteness. We think these labels, left, right, progressive, conservative, we think they're real things. They're categories.
Yep.
They really don't exist.
They're the maps, not the territory.
We gotta get past those things in order to have dialogues with people.
Yep.
And in terms
With
of your
persons,
concern, I think if you look at political discourse, people will put up with a lot of shit a long, long time. But then eventually it gets to a point, it just becomes too much, things cascade and changes come very quickly. We look at the Civil War. You know, Republican parties founded in 1854 in Wisconsin and Michigan, or whoever wants to frame it. 1861, White House has a Republican in it. French Revolution. The revolution in Russia and Eastern Europe, nonviolent as it was, happened very quickly because these contradictions built up so much to a point they couldn't be ignored anymore. I think we're getting to that point.
And what dialogue needs to do is bring those.
The Green Party going to be ready when that stuff starts cascading.
And I hope that dialogue can bring those contradictions out in the open, where people can see them, and then that change becomes possible.
In relation to what you just said, John, I think, you know, we talk about dialogues can be boxing, can be anything, trucking. We talk here about green issues, but there is also a psychological conclusion that's left out that earlier. It's very basic. I interview lots of people for my job. And if you just make people feeling heard,
Right.
Yeah.
just that very basic human
Yes.
connection, then they just open up and they are ready to listen to you because it's a safe forum, a safe platform, and then you can really travel miles. And that, you know, I'm very quick when I meet someone. Some people are very guarded, so you just ask a question, you get the rhetoric, but then there's something personal. 2 or 3 questions, maybe about itself, and then boom, the doors open, and then you're free flying. You know, always forget that we are human. It takes very little to connect with someone, very little, and that is just a basic feeling of being heard.
Yeah, and I just want to say one small thing about that. I think you're exactly right. In a lot of counterproductive dialogue is people just wanting to express themselves because they think it needs to be said, it's inside them, and they just need to get it out. And sometimes that opens conversation and dialogue, and sometimes it shuts it down,
Right.
but people need to get that out. Yeah.
And I think we all feel unheard in this fight, especially with this saturated,
Right.
bombarded, like that.
And,
And we feel frustrated.
and if you give people a space, a safe space
Yeah,
in which to
safe
get
space.
that out, then poetry and magic can happen.
It happens, absolutely.
Well, I guess,
Is there someone else?
someone who hasn't spoken yet?
Yeah, we both already
Okay.
spoke.
How about anybody? Okay.
But,
1, 2.
For good or for bad, I and probably a good portion of the country, the means of dialogue these days is Facebook. And so,
God help us.
for me personally, it has become an exercise in passive aggression. I can bring, so, in other words, I don't know what the etiquette is. So if someone posts something that I really object to, I don't want to post something as a comment to that, but I'll find myself responding on my own thing later. Like if someone says, you know, if someone says something like, gee, isn't Hillary the greatest? Rather than attack that, I'll post something, you know, attacking, you know, some, on my own, you know, like there's a lot going on saying Hillary is a bona fide liberal. Here, look at this to prove it. And then I want to say, you know, I hear some people saying Hillary's a bona fide liberal. Do you know she's got connections to Bill Clinton? Is that counterproductive? I mean, because you know.
You haven't spoken yet. Go ahead.
No, actually, this leads me to a point. I mean, and one thing I think we have to think about in terms of dialogue going forward, and that is millennials in particular, but others as well, they're dialoguing differently now. They are doing it through social media. They're doing it through 140 characters on Twitter. They're doing it on Facebook. I mean, over time, older people are going to have to figure out how to dialogue with younger people in new ways, different fora that are now being used. How are we going to be able to do that and make those types of connections and have a real legitimate dialogue with people who don't dialogue the way we always dialogue. And I think that is something.
Is that really dialogue?
They think it is, so I think they think it is, and I think that's the way they do it. I mean, so, I mean, it's a different way of doing it, but I mean, I can sit here and say I don't think it's real good dialogue, but the fact is that's how they're doing it.
And I hope that we can help to teach them there are other ways as
Well,
well.
no, I understand. I mean, it has to work both ways, but I mean, clearly, some percentage
You got a good
of the
point.
young millennial population, that's the way they're going to dialogue. So if we want to dialogue with them, we're going to have to learn how to do that, how to create a space and a mechanism to be able to have a useful dialogue in the type of mechanism, in the type of ways that they're doing.
You know, I just do it. I post stuff on Facebook, and one of my young coworkers, whose husband, actually, I found out he was a mercenary because he came to work wearing a Blackwater t-shirt. And I was like, what? And I just post everything. She reads it, and I would think that she would hate it, but she puts it on my page and go, oh, I miss your rants. How are you? They call them rants. I call it information.
About over here.
Yeah, I want to respond to a very good point about early childhood education dialogue. If you happen to know the root of the word educate, in Latin, means lead out. It's not being didactic, it's bringing out in the person, which is extremely close to dialogue.
Would you repeat that? Would you repeat that, what you just said? Would you repeat it, yeah? Well, I think it's very good to emphasize what you just said.
The point was brought up in early teaching dialogue in early education by the gentleman in the other corner. That really goes back to the root of educate, which is
Yeah, exactly.
to bring out, to lead out
Right.
the other person.
Yeah,
Educo.
exactly.
Educo.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that is dialogue.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can teach them that way. The hell with the new techniques and little technology stuff. If they got the basics, it's still going to work.
The ways are not going away.
We can't depend on the new ways to just go away.
There you
No,
go.
but they'll have the ability to do dialogue in spite of the new stuff. And all the anger and fighting back and forth on that crap.
Okay, Ben, you have it.
Right. This workshops deal with a very important issue, and certainly the Greens need to make an emphasis of it and be dealing with the whole matter of dialogue. But I feel that we need to also emphasize the matter of time is short in terms of extremely important issues like climate dialogue, climate disruption. And it concerns me that the Greens need to be a little more active in that area, certainly relating to electoral politics, but I think also in the action area. I am absolutely appalled by the fact that we are allowing the climate disruption folks, the ones engaged in all types of oil and gas and so forth. And they are now, because of their actions, disrupting our climate and the effects on the many levels of our environment. So that I think that we also need to have in mind the action component. And one thing that comes to me, and I've been wanting to bring this, I'd like to bring this up at our conference now, and that is, I think maybe all of you are aware that the United Nations will have an important conference in Paris at the end of November and into December. I think that there is a place where perhaps the Greens should have a presence. What about a delegation of Greens going to it and work with the young people in many parts of the world who I'm sure will be going there, and Pope Francis is helping us along. There could be a disruption among young people at that conference and even before the UN assembly in Paris, and it could be such a dynamic effort going on, it could change things. I'd like to see the Greens being involved with that. So at the proper time, I'd like to bring up a proposal. Let's have a delegation of Greens going to that
Great idea.
Paris.
If
I'm sorry that
excuse me, there are Greens going.
I'm-
And what that would do for the image of the Greens in this country.
Exactly. So I'm sorry to, this is expanding.
Did you hear Sandra? Sandra said, this is happening.
This is expanding on it, but I think it's part of it. While we do need to be in dialogue, what we also be needing in terms of more immediate action.
Let's end.
Bahram?
Yeah, I know that
You can too.
from culture of the international community. Last year at COP20, there were delegations from the Americas and Global Greens at the COP meeting. And this year, there are going to be
Yes.
people going there. The Sangha is one of them. So there is always delegations of all Greens, global and local federations, Americans are going there.
And you had
Okay, yeah, though I'm not going because the Global Greens had a very small group of people that were going, but there are members of Global Greens and the Federation of Green Party of Americas going. I'm going independently for the Global Eco Village Network as a delegate from them. But also the structure of the federation with the COP meetings is political parties cannot go as political parties. So you can go as an organization. So like Elizabeth May from the Green Party of Canada goes, but she goes as from an environmental organization. And I was with her in Cancun at the Global Climate Change. I was in Peru. So I've been going to those meetings.
You all know who Elizabeth May is.
Green Party, that's a Green Party success story, but the Green Party of Canada. So she was the head of the Green Party of Canada and then was elected to Parliament and is now serving her second term elected to Parliament, and I think they've elected now one or two more Greens.
She's
phenomenal.
She's been identified and nominated as the most effective member of Canada's Parliament in years, and she is, but it was nice to have gotten that. But I think we should probably wrap this up.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that. First of all, Elizabeth May is actually from Connecticut, so she's from here. And also the Global what is it, the global? That Jill's involved in, the global,
Oh,
we get the thing that comes out.
the convergence.
Convergence for,
There's the convergence.
thank you. Okay, so they've already sent something out, and they're asking for actions from those, between those dates. And a lot of that is, there's means like Jill that are involved in that heavily, so there is that.
So if I could just make one last comment for me, and then I'll shut up. A great deal of the conversation I've heard reflects a tension between ideals and values and practices. If you look at the Green Party literature, there are the 10 key ideals, and then there's the platform, which is practices. It's the tension between those two that sparks creativity. And so all the differences that we've aired here today I don't see them as differences. I see them as elements for further dialogue and creativity.
Thank you, Charlie, and also thank each one of you for your wonderful, wonderful participation and expression of your thoughts. Woo! It's great. Thank you.
Thank you.